What is a refresh token? Why do we need it? How does it make our system secure? How to implement it? Find out in today's video. Hello and welcome to Code with Sar. I'm Sar. How are you doing today? Today I want to respond to a question from Dev4G about the role change and the authentication revoking. It is from my previous video talking about policy-based authorization. It is a very good question. Thank you Dev4G for bringing it up. Basically, the scenario is an access token got issued. At the same time, the role of the user has changed. So how does the system deal with it? Well, this is a challenging scenario, but also very practical. And I believe there's mature technology being there to address it. We just need to find it out. And I think that piece is the refresh token. So let's talk about it. Here, I'm going to use an analogy to explain what is a refresh token and why is it important. Let's meet Sam. When Sam was born, he was given a birth certificate. Imagine that as username and password. That proves his identity. Time flies. He's 18 now. It's time for him to get a drive license. So he goes to an authority, like the Department of License, show them the birth certificate, and of course take the test. Let's ignore the details. And the authority give him back the drive license, and that is the access token. That is a proof of the identity, as well as a role of a driver. Now Sam is going to do something with it. Let's say rent a truck. Of course, why not? So he brings his license to a car rental. The rental agent checked the license, verified the signature, making sure nothing is tampered, and they issued the vehicle. Well, think about what happened so far. You need to have a driver role before you could get a vehicle, which is the protected resource, right? Okay, that all makes sense. But unfortunately, Sam has not been a good driver. The authority decided to revoke the role of driver from the identity of Sam. What needs to happen? And that is the scenario that we are talking about today. Revoking a role. Wait, are we not going to talk about the refresh token today? We're going to stay with me a little bit longer. It's going to worth your time. But if you really only care about the implementation, jump ahead, use the chapters. Okay, the DOL decided to revoke the drive license from Sam. There's one major problem. When a driver's license is presented, how does the agent know that it hadn't been revoked? One way is for it to always check with the authority. Of course, that's going to put a lot of pressure on the authorities. Mapping that to the digital world, you probably need an identity server or dedicated identity service to handle that. We're looking for something more efficient. Here's the idea. How about put an expiration date on a driver's license? Once Sam's driver license is expired, he has to go to the authority again, presenting his birth certificate, aka username password, and get a new driver license. And that is the chance for the DOL to say, oh hey Sam, we're going to issue an ID card, but you cannot use that as a driver's license. And thus, the driver's role got revoked. Of course, there's a problem for that. The driver's license doesn't expire for years. And a lot of damage could be done during the period. But in the digital world, this problem is relatively easy to solve. How about the access token expired in 1 hour? Okay. Now how about 30 minutes? Fine, 10 minutes? We can do that. How about 5 minutes? We can go even shorter than that. But again, there is a problem. Every time the DOL issue a new license to Sam, or your service issue an access token to the user, they need to prove their identity by using a birth certificate or a username password. Oh, that is not a good experience. You don't want the user to log in again and again. Here's how to address that problem. Think about Sam went to DOL for the first time. Well, birth certificate, right? Okay. Say everything went well, the DOL hand out the license. In addition, They create a ping on his file, and they give the same ping to Sam, telling him, next time, if you need to refresh your drive license, give us your old license and the ping. As far as the ping matches the record on Sam's file, they're going to issue the new license. No birth certificate needed. And when Sam gets the new license, he always gets a new ping. Well, you know the story. Sam got into accidents. The authority admin steps in, scrap out the ping. The old license got expired soon, and Sam's ping doesn't match the record any further. And since Sam cannot get his license renewed, he then lost his truck. Well, it is a sad story. But the point is, the ping is a refresh token. It allows us to issue short-term access token, which is safer. It allows the user to avoid logging again and again. And at the same time, the administrator had a way to require the user to log in again by remove the refresh token from the user's file based on some events, like, for example, suspicious activities of an access token, or a role change of a specific user. I wish this couple minutes worth it, so that not only you know what is a refresh token, but also why is it there and when is it useful. Well, finally, it is time for us to look into the implementations. Let's keep building the JWT Auth in WebAPI project. Well, on the roles branch, for the new to the channel, I'm going to go over this project briefly so that we all have some context. But if you find it difficult to understand what I'm talking, I highly recommend you to go back to the existing videos to watch the basics. Let's begin with startup. Here we have authentication set up to use JWT, and we have 3 controllers. Among them, token controllers used for authentication. We post on the route of token with the proper credential like the username and password, and we get back the access token. That is a driver license. A small detail is that the current role is hard-coded to admin, and you are supposed to get it from somewhere like a database, right? Also, related to today's topic, there's expiration on the token already. It's 5 minutes. The other 2 controllers provide protected resources, one for the user and another for the admin. Now let's build up the refresh token. The very first thing we want to do is put an expiration onto the access token. You're going to figure out your number there. For the demo purpose, I'm going to make it really short. And I'm thinking about 30 seconds. Now if you debug immediately, you're going to see the token valid for more than 30 seconds. So pay attention, this is going to save you time. You come to the startup, set up the clock skew to timespan.0. The default value is 5 minutes. And that's too long, a wiggly room for the expiration check in our scenario. You also want to make sure there is no custom lifetime validator. Now let's run our first test. Here, I prepared my username and password, make a post on the token endpoint. Here we go. This is the access token. Let me copy it, and I'm going to use that to get admin resource. Well, this is proved code, and we all know it's going to work, right? The only change we made so far is on the expiration. So the token will expire after 30 seconds. So I'll just burn a couple of seconds by talking to you, and now let's try it again. Okay, 4.1 unauthorized. The token is not accepted by the system any further because it expired. Great. Well, as a client at this moment, to access the resource again, we need another access token. We could go to the login page again, supply the username and password, or we could use a refresh token, except we don't have one. So next, we're going to write code to create a refresh token. Let's see the code. The current access token is returned as an anonymous class. We're going to add more properties. So let's make it a class. I'll call it authentication result. And it will have a property for access token, a property for refresh token, and another property for expiry. Now the expiry is not 100% needed because the same information is there in the access token, but it makes the client easier that it doesn't need to decode the JWT token by itself. Coming back to the token controller, I'm going to create a concurrent dictionary to hold the refresh token for any given user. Now this is very, very important. A refresh token belongs to a given user. In real project, you actually don't need this dictionary. What you would do is to put the refresh token along with your user record. In other words, if the user information is in the database, put their refresh token in the database. Make it one-to-one or one-to-many relationship. That is important because when you revoke refresh tokens for a given user. Now let's write a method to generate the refresh token for a valid user. The token could be any type. It needs to be serializable, and obviously it cannot be guessable. I am using a GUID here because it is simple, but if you search online, there are sophisticated ways to generate refresh tokens. The method by itself needs to reach two goals actually. One is create a new token every time it is called, and the new value need to be persistent to a place where you have your user records. The code that I'm writing here only works for one session and it doesn't scale at all, but it makes the point. Now let's see how are we going to use it. Let's update this getAccessToken method to return authentication result, so it will include access token, refresh token, and the expiry. On line 44, the user credential is validated, so we don't need to worry about the validation. Let's pull out the expiry because we're going to return it later. Now we update the return type to authentication result. Here we call a new method generate refresh token. Again, the username has already been verified, so we're going to use it directly into the expiry. Now let's update the caller. Let's run the code and we expect to see the refresh token on the side of access token being returned. It looks great to me. Now that we have the refresh token, let's take a look at how to use it. Let's create a new route on the controller. I'm going to name it getRefreshToken. It will take in an authentication result, and that's going to be the expired access token along with the refresh token. I'm going to give it a route of refresh and use the verb post. This method is going to be very similar to getToken. The difference is that getToken verifies user by username and password. Here, we're going to process the existing token and making sure the refresh token is in effect. So let's start by overload the getAccessToken method. Let me copy the whole method. And I'll change the parameter from login contract to authentication result. Of course, the isValid method need to be rewritten as well, because that is the core for validation. The rest of the code generates the access token. It is very possible this could be abstracted out and refactored to be reused. But for now, let's keep the duplication. It looks like what is missing is only username. We know the username is there on the access token, so we're going to extract it from there. So the isValid method is going to return it. Let's write it. isValid takes in authentication result and return the result of Boolean, at the same time output the username. Now the username is on the claims principal of the expired access token. I am going to show you how to write the method to get the claims principal from the token. But for now, let's move on. Assuming the principal is correctly extracted, then we need to verify the principal is not null. If it isn't, let's find out the username on it. And the username should not be null or empty. Now we have the username. Let's extract the given refresh token. It happens to be a GUID here, but we could do other validations if it is a different type as well. Let's use the username to extract the current refresh token. And then we need to making sure those two tokens matches each other. And if it passes all these tests, we're going to say, yes, this is the valid. Now let's get back to get principal from expired token. Let me start by generate the method. We want to verify the access token even though it is expired. Everything else should still be fine. The first step is for us to have a token validation parameters. We have had one in the startup, so we're going to copy it from there. The difference is we don't care about the clock skew here, and we don't want to verify the lifetime. So I'm going to delete the clock skew. At the same time, I'm going to set validate lifetime to false. Next, I'm going to give this token validation parameter to a token handler. And use the token handler to validate the access token. This will return the principal that we want. As a side effect, it also returns the security token. And since it is a JWT security token, we can do some additional check on it. Once done, I'm going to return the principal. Let me format it a little bit, and then here we go. Alright, I think we have all the parts that we wanted. I just need to update the color a little bit to wire everything up. Let's run the code and try out the new route. I'm going to firstly post a token using username and password, as usual. Then I'm going to use the access token to get this admin resource again. I'm then going to wait for a bit just to making sure that this access token expired. Now, instead of going back to the token endpoint, I go to the refresh route, paste in the authentication result. This is the one with the expired access token, but a good refresh token. And I used that to get a new access token and a refresh token. And then I'm going to go back to the admin resource just to verify that the newly get access token works. And it does. Now, if you have a front-end client, for example, a JavaScript client, once you have the authentication result, before issuing any request to the protected resource, you check the expiration first. If it has already expired, hit the refresh endpoint to get a new access token before issuing the call. And that doesn't require any user interaction at all. If you reach this part of the video, I want to thank you for your time first. Now let's think about one interesting question. If a hacker gets your short-lived access token, he probably gets your refresh token at the same time. And if you could use your refresh token to get a new access token, so does the hacker. Then what are we doing? This question got me for a while, until I realized the biggest difference in between those two tokens. An access token, once issued, it is very difficult to revoke. You could consider switch out the private key, then all the signatures become invalid, and that impacts every user for your system. But for refresh token, it's relatively easy to revoke. Now, a hacker gets your access token, he could use it for 30 seconds, and the refresh token got revoked, and the hacker cannot get another access token. That's how it keeps the system secure. To make it even more secure, you can put an expiration on the refresh token as well. Coming next, let's look into how to quickly implement a revoke endpoint. Now, when we revoke a refresh token, we usually revoke it on a specific user. So I'm going to use the username as a parameter. What it does here is going to remove it from the dictionary. And then in the real project, it could be update a record in the database so that to set the refresh token to null. No matter what we do, the goal is so that the refresh token on the record will not match the one in the user's hand. What a sabotage action. Oh, and if you are writing an endpoint like this, don't forget to protect it so that only your administrator can access it. Now let's verify it works. At the very beginning, the user need to go to post token to get an access token for the first time. This is the username password scenario. Once that succeeded, he or she then can go to the refresh endpoint to refresh the token. Now, imagine the administrator don't want the refresh token to work any further. So we step in and revoke it. Again, this operation usually is per user. After that is done, let's come back and try to refresh the token again. Voila! No valid refresh token in system. Of course, handle the exception. You don't want to spill out that much information to the end user. Okay, we talked about what is a refresh token, why it's useful, and how to implement one, and how does Revoke work. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you find it helpful, give me a thumb up, let your friends know, subscribe for more, and keep coding, keep improving. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, take care.